The United Kingdom, home of fascinating wildlife like the fearless mating foxes of Kent, and beautiful mountains that go largely unexplored by the carefree mating foxes of Kent. It's also home to some of the world's most gifted artists, like whomever took this picture of the stoic mating foxes of Kent. Unfortunately, the UK is about to be completely fucked, in a way not unlike the resigned mating foxes of Kent. And the reason for that is that this week, the UK had some very big news.
The UK has a new Prime Minister. Boris Johnson took over today from Theresa May, sealing the transition of power in a handshake with the Queen.
He bowed, then broke the rules by telling his new staff what she said.
Exactly, and it was apparently, and I quote, D's nuts. It's true. It's true. She said it to every Prime Minister since Winston Churchill, and she won't say why. But yes, incredibly, Britain's new Prime Minister is Boris Johnson, and even if you know nothing about British politics, you're probably already vaguely aware of him. As Mayor of London, he famously got stuck on a zip line while promoting the 2012 Olympics. And if you've ever seen a photo of him, you will probably remember it, because it's honestly hard to find one where he doesn't look ridiculous. In fact, everything about his appearance is consistently immaculately wrong. Here he is, wearing a bike helmet that's somehow both too small and too big for his head. That's not easy to do. Here he is, looking like what would happen if an egg could be both hairy and sad. Even his childhood pictures are funny, because here he is, looking more like a young Anna Wintour than I'm guessing she did at that age. You may even have seen this clip that went viral recently of Boris's endearingly weird answer to a very simple question about what he does to relax.
I have a thing where I make models of... when I was in London, Mayor of London, we built a beautiful... I make buses.
You make models of buses?
I make models of buses.
So they're going to be in Downing Street?
So what I do... No, what I don't make models of buses, what I make is... I get old, I don't know, wooden crates.
Yeah.
Right? And then I paint them.
So you're making cardboard buses? Okay, that's what you do to enjoy yourself?
I paint the passengers enjoying themselves.
Okay, great.
On the wonderful bus.
Okay, so three things about that. One, yes, it's magnificent. Two, there's just no way that's true. But three, if it were true, I now want nothing more than to see one of those fucking buses. Because if they're terrible, that's weird. But if they're impressive, that's somehow weirder. The very idea of the new Prime Minister painting Crates buses in his spare time to relax is just endlessly fascinating. But Boris is so much more than the potential Michelangelo of vehicular crafts. He was an absolutely crucial leader in the Brexit campaign, famously riding around in a gigantic red non-crate bus with a complete lie splashed across the side of it. And now he is Prime Minister and has to face the challenge of finalising a Brexit withdrawal deal by October 31st, which is less than 100 days from now. And the consequences of messing that up could have catastrophic ramifications for Britain, Europe and the world. So tonight, we thought it might be helpful to explain who exactly Boris Johnson is. And let's start with the fact that, given that Britain's new leader is a clownish figure with silly hair and a passing relationship with the truth, you may already be thinking of the person you're almost always thinking about anyway. And you are not alone in that. There have been countless headlines comparing Boris to Donald Trump. And just this week, Trump did it himself.
They're saying Britain Trump. They call him Britain Trump, and people are saying that's a good thing. That they like me over there.
No, they don't. No, they don't. They absolutely do not. They don't like you over there, and no one ever says Britain Trump unless it's in the context of a sentence like, I'm getting the fuck out of Britain, Trump is coming to visit this weekend. But to call Boris Johnson Britain Trump is neither exactly wrong nor exactly right. Johnson is actually a lot more complex than Trump in a number of important ways. For one, while Trump tells you he has the best words, but doesn't, Johnson is more than happy to show you how erudite he is. Just watch him charmingly drop some sporting trivia ahead of the London Olympics.
Ping pong was invented on the dining tables of England, ladies and gentlemen, in the 19th century. It was called whiff-waff. And there, I think you have the essential difference between us and the rest of the world. Other nations, the French, looked at a dining table and saw an opportunity to have dinner. We looked at a dining table and saw an opportunity to play whiff-waff.
Look, yes, I will admit that is objectively funny, although I'm not sure that that whiff-waff anecdote reflects quite as well on the British as he's implying there. The French looked at the dining table as a canvas upon which to create exceptional cuisine, and the British saw a way to basically invent mouse tennis. And look, Johnson is more than happy to look ridiculous. It enabled him to not just survive when he fucks up, but actually benefit. That absurd zipline photo from the Olympics would have killed most politicians' careers. But Boris found a way to laugh at himself and charm everyone. Just watch how it got covered on the news at the time.
Isn't that fantastic? This is a man who some are tipping as a future Prime Minister.
Look, I think if anyone has won the Olympics, I would say it's Boris Johnson.
Hold on there. If anyone won the Olympics? To be clear, people definitely won the Olympics. Specifically, the winners. The winners won the Olympics. And in a nutshell, that has been the root of Boris's appeal. A lovable mess, weathering adversity with humour and good cheer. But the truth is, there may be a great deal more calculation behind that image than first appears. Because Boris learned at an early age the benefit of making yourself the butt of the joke, as his own sister remembers.
He discovered he could make people laugh when he was in a French play and he had to recite Molière and he hadn't bothered to learn his lines and he hid behind a pillar reading them out, which was obviously much funnier than if he'd learnt them perfectly and had stood on the stage and declaimed them.
Yeah, obviously. It's always funnier when things go wrong, like in this photo of Johnson shaking hands with the Queen. Oh, no! Oh, what an embarrassing mistake. See? Objectively funnier. And by the way, how are neither of you into this? Boris actually learned a great deal from that incident, as he himself will admit.
Do you think that you learnt something for later life from acting in plays at Eton, that you could actually get more laughs by looking as if you don't know your lines than actually remembering them?
Well, I certainly think that as a general tactic in life, if that's what you're driving at, it is often useful to give the slight impression that you are deliberately pretending not to know what is going on, because the reality may be that you don't know what is going on, but people won't be able to tell the difference.
And that, right there, is the key to Boris Johnson, presenting his own lack of preparation so charmingly that you actually doubt he's unprepared, but he is. It's an incredibly powerful trick, and incidentally, it's clips like that that are one major reason why Boris is not the Britain Trump. Because can you imagine Trump having that level of self-reflection? Look, with Covfefe, the tactic was to present myself as a kind of subliterate clown, to distract you from the fact that I'm a mound of skin tautly stretched across the howling chasm of the space where a soul should be. It's a very useful tool when deployed well. The point here is, though, Johnson's bumbling persona is a carefully calibrated act. Take his hair. Multiple people have said he actually messes it up on purpose. A BBC producer tweeted that he'd always ruffle it right before the camera started rolling, which kind of makes sense, doesn't it? He's been on TV hundreds of times, and he always looks like a mess. What were the chances that before every one of those appearances, he combed, gelled, and carefully parted his hair, only to then be hit in the face by a goose right as they started filming? No, he looks like that because he wants to. Or take his clothing. He's often seen outside in eccentric, chaotic outfits. But he knows how to dress. He just also knows that that is a more relatable image than this one from when he was in the notoriously elite Bullingdon Club at Oxford University with his friend David Cameron. Now, that photo was a huge liability for Cameron, but not for Johnson, because he's cleverly inoculated himself against that image of astonishing privilege by presenting himself as a cartoon Englishman who dresses like a raccoon who just emerged from David Foster Wallace's trash. And once you realise what he is doing, it makes you question everything that you previously found charming about him. Remember that clip where he's talking about painting buses? Undeniably funny. But some in Britain have pointed out that it might have been an attempt to change the Google search results people receive when they look for something like Boris Johnson bus, meaning that people would see that delightful clip rather than this significantly less delightful bullshit. Now, was that actually his intention? It's impossible to know, but you can't rule it out either. And once you see the possibility that his gaffes are in fact calculated manipulations, you can't unsee it. It's like looking at the FedEx logo and finally noticing the arrow. or looking at the Starbucks logo and finally noticing Robert De Niro's face. You can never look at it in quite the same way again. And beneath all of Boris's surface charm are some truly nasty elements. For one thing, he is a liar. As a young journalist, he was fired from his first job at the Times of London for completely making up a quote. In fact, his editor claimed Johnson was the single worst employee he's ever had and skipped many work days to hang out with his best friend, Jeffrey Epstein, which is terrible. It's not true. I just made that quote up. But now you can see just how irresponsible it is to fabricate them. And from there, Johnson failed upwards to a job at the Daily Telegraph, where he built a following on a series of flagrant falsehoods about the European Union as their Brussels correspondent. Falsehoods that would help lay the groundwork for the Brexit vote decades later. Johnson even admits that he had something called a save-get. It's a key command, like a copy-paste, of a phrase that he liked to use to paint a caricature of the EU.
I had a sort of save-get, you still have save-get keys, a save-get kind of intro, which was Britain stood alone last night as, and then I would fill in whatever it was, as Europe proceeded with plans to abolish the prawn cocktail flavour crisp or whatever.
OK, so first, for those unfamiliar, prawn cocktail crisps are real. They shouldn't be, but they are. And to explain how it happened, it's what happens when a country looks at a dining table and forgoes food in favour of playing whiff-waff. But Johnson actually did write a series of columns claiming Europe was attempting to ban the prawn cocktail crisp, which was a complete lie. Europe was never planning to abolish them, and they immediately pointed that out. But Boris's allegation spread like wildfire and became a popular example of an out-of-control EU. And as recently as 2016, a full 25 years after his bullshit was completely debunked, Boris actually cited the Great War against the British prawn cocktail crisp as part of his case for Brexit. And by the way, if there ever is a Great War against the prawn cocktail crisp, there will be no winners, believe me, because I will say this, eating them... It's like eating a cremated mermaid, but in a bad way. And oh, that's bad. And look, it would be bad enough if Boris were just a liar, but he's also been more than willing to tap into outright bigotry to get ahead. He's made repeated references to some immigrants as people that want to leech off the state, and over the years he's made references to pickaninnies. He said the people of Congo had watermelon smiles. He's called gay men tank-topped bum boys, and just last year there was this.
They look like letterboxes, Boris Johnson wrote on Monday. He even compared women who wear them to bank robbers.
That is an appalling comment that leaves a truly disgusting taste in your mouth, much like the shrimp crisp dust that has very much voted to remain on my fucking tongue. And look, when reporters camped outside Johnson's house, he really turned the cartoon version of himself up to 11, ruffling up his hair, donning an absurd outfit and waddling out to charm them. And just watch how depressingly effective it winds up being.
Would you apologise for your comment?
Will you have a cup of tea?
Will you apologise for your comment?
Would you like a cup of tea?
Yeah, sure.
You go on, have a cup of tea.
Thank you. Do you regret...
Would you like a cup of tea?
Do you regret your comments? Do you regret your comments, sir?
Go on, have a cup of tea.
Thank you very much.
There you go. There you go.
Do you regret your comments, sir?
I want you to have a cup of tea.
If I have a cup of tea, will you answer my question?
No, I'm here solely on a humanitarian mission because you've been here all day and you've been incredibly patient and I feel very sorry for you because I have nothing to say about this matter except offer you some tea.
Okay.
Okay, go on.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Go on.
No! Don't take the tea and do not thank him for it, because think about what just happened there. He referred to Muslim women as letterboxes, and in the space of 30 seconds, he had them laughing along with him. He was in trouble, he put on full Brit face, and those journalists fucking fell for it. And for the record, I can say Brit face. You can't. I can definitely say it. We can say it together, you can't say it at all. That's the rule. But unfortunately, Boris the Prime Minister may have just hit the limits of where that charm can take him, because crucially, he now has less than 100 days to negotiate a Brexit deal, and his well-engineered, clumsy Brit persona does not necessarily travel well. We saw that during his time as Foreign Secretary. In 2017, he was in Myanmar, where, for some reason, he kept muttering Rudyard Kipling's colonialist poem Mandalay to himself.
Bells, they say. We got one bell. Come you back, you English soldier. You remember that too. On mic. Yeah.
The ambassador is quick to spot that reminding their hosts of British rule might not be wise.
So probably not. What, the range Mandalay? No, not appropriate.
Is it good stuff? Or is that actually bad stuff? Because I would argue, as a Foreign Secretary, it's best not to remind people of when your country subjugated theirs for more than a century. It honestly would have been more diplomatic at that point for him to recite the lyrics to My Neck, My Back, parentheses, Lick It by Kaya. My neck, my back, lick my pussy, and my crack. Good stuff, good stuff. And look, that wasn't a one-off. Johnson's time in the Foreign Office was littered with gaffes, as this journalist explained, with the help of a visual aid.
I've spoken to one figure who said that working with Boris Johnson is like walking a few feet behind a horse, shoveling its shit.
Wow, that is a striking quote, although I'm not really sure why that journalist felt the need to be next to a horse to deliver it. How did he pitch that to the stable owner? Look, I'm just worried that people have forgotten what horses look like. So please stand aside while I humiliate your animal on the news. And the problem is, if Johnson messes up the Brexit negotiation, the pile-up of shit could be considerable here. As most economists believe, a no-deal Brexit would cause a deep recession, and the EU may be extra immune to Boris's charms. Remember, he was a key figure in the Brexit campaign and has lied about them for decades in his newspaper columns, on top of which he has privately referred to the French as turds and publicly compared the EU to Hitler. So he's not working with a lot of goodwill at this point. And Boris has made extravagant, unkeepable promises, including that he will somehow devise a way to sever Northern Ireland from the EU without creating a hard border with Ireland. But his suggestions cannot work. And EU Commissioner Jean-Claude Juncker has responded pretty clearly to them.
Juncker reiterated that the EU's position that the withdrawal agreement is the best and only agreement possible. In other words, Juncker said no to Johnson.
Yeah, of course he did. So Johnson is shit out of luck at this point. His bumbling charm may work wonders in low-stakes situations, but that's not where he is now. Think of it like this. Hugh Grant is delightful in romantic comedies. The stammering, the hesitation, the inability to relate to his immediate surroundings with any level of competence. You want to see Hugh Grant in 4 Weddings and a Funeral, but no one wants to see him in United 93, because the context would make his character a lot less charming. Sorry, this is a really stupid question, particularly in view of your recent jihad. But I just wondered if, by any chance, in the words of David Cassidy, when he was still with the Partridge Family, I believe, you might be persuaded to, should Allah will it, obviously, land this plane. Allahu, as I believe you say it, Akbar. Because, yeah, it's less good. It's less good in a situation that matters. Because Johnson cannot get what he wants or has promised here. And his only hope of avoiding complete catastrophe is through focus, discipline, and detail. But those are 3 Achilles' heels of his. I'll show you. One of his great plans for mitigating the potentially catastrophic effects of a no-deal Brexit is to suggest that if the UK misses that October deadline, it could simply trade freely with the EU under Article 24, paragraph 5b of this existing trade agreement. But, and you do not need to know the details of this, the very next paragraph, 5c, makes it clear that that is simply not possible. And just watch as a journalist who actually understood that challenged Johnson on it.
You talk about Article 5b. In
paragraph 5.
24.
Article 24. Get the detail right.
5,
Get the detail right, Andrew. It's Article 24, paragraph 5b.
And how would you handle paragraph 5c?
I would confide entirely in paragraph 5b, because that is...
So how would you get round what's in 5c?
I would confide entirely in paragraph 5b, which is enough for our purposes. No.
Oh, for fuck's sake! That no was delivered with the confidence of a man who doesn't know what he's talking about, but thinks it doesn't matter. It's a no that says, yeah, I'm full of shit, so what? Just walk a few feet behind me and clean it up with a shovel. But that lack of attention to detail for a process that has the potential to impact millions of people is really alarming, and there is no reason for much hope here, because all of the skills that has helped Johnson to become Prime Minister will not paper over all of the deficits that are going to make him terrible at that job. Johnson has now backed himself into a corner because Parliament has rejected the EU's deal. The EU says there is no better deal to be had. There is really no good way out of this, meaning that he's pretty much now stranded. And not the charming kind of stranded that means you've somehow won the Olympics. Because this time, that zipline isn't over Olympic spectators, it's over a volcano. It's set to erupt in 3 months' time. And the only people who can help get him down are the same people he's accused of being turds and Hitlers. And unfortunately for Johnson, Britain, Europe and the world, I just don't think he's going to be able to fucking whiff-waff his way out of this one.